I graduated from Westmore Military Academy at 24. Top quarter of my class, Bronze Star in marksmanship, and a head full of dreams big enough to topple mountains. You know the kind. Young, stubborn, bulletproof. I had a roadmap drawn in my mind. Career officer, steady rise, a house with a white fence, and someday, a family to fill it. No detours. No surprises. Turns out, life's funny about maps. It folds them up and laughs in your face. At 25, I met Laura. It was a spring afternoon, one of those rare days when the sun feels almost too generous. I was at a buddy's wedding, playing best man, mind half on the speech I had to give and half on the escape route to the bar. Then I saw her, standing by the buffet table, arguing, passionately, with the bartender about the ethics of tip jars. Smart. Beautiful. That kind of presence that pulls you in without trying. I walked over, made some dumb joke about how if she was negotiating drink prices, I needed her on my side for life. She laughed, a real, unguarded laugh. Not the polite kind women give to be nice. No, this was genuine. Like she saw me, not just the uniform. A year later, we were married. Our romance burned fast, but it burned clean. Laura was everything I thought I needed, supportive, loving, ambitious in a way that still left room for my ambitions. She believed in me when I didn't even know I needed belief. She wanted a life just as steady as mine, a good home, a future laid out with military precision. Or so it seemed. The first few years were the kind people frame in pictures and post on their mantle. Cookouts with friends, lazy Sunday mornings, handwritten notes tucked into rucksacks before deployment rotations. I wasn't a general yet, wasn't famous, but I was steady, reliable, a good man with a good woman. Maybe too steady. There were moments, tiny ones, when Laura would drift off mid-conversation, like her mind had slipped into some other room I wasn't allowed to enter. Sometimes when I talked about the future, kids, moving for assignments, late nights at bases, I'd catch a flicker behind her smile. Not sadness, something harder to read. But I didn't push. I didn't pry. I believed. No, I knew. That love was about trust, not interrogation. And I trusted her the way a soldier trusts the man covering his six. Blindly. Fully. One night, I remember, she fell asleep on the couch, her head in my lap while we watched some god-awful sitcom. Her breathing even. The little crease between her brows finally relaxed. I brushed a strand of hair off her face and thought, God, I am the luckiest man alive. That was the last moment I can remember before the crack started. Back when I still thought love, like a bridge, could bear any weight if you built it strong enough. Turns out, some earthquakes don't show up on blueprints. You only feel them when the ground gives out beneath your feet. At first, it was little things. Late nights, she couldn't explain. Phone calls that dropped off when I walked into the room. New passwords where there never used to be passwords. But when you love someone, you become a master of excuses. She's under pressure. Work's been hell. Maybe I'm just being paranoid. It's amazing, really, the lies we tell ourselves just to hold on to something slipping through our fingers. I kept busy, buried myself in work, took on extra projects. Thought maybe if I showed her I was building us a better future, she'd find her way back to me. Instead, she found someone else. The truth came in the most unglamorous way possible. A text message, blinking up at me from her laptop screen when she went to take a shower. I wasn't snooping. I wasn't digging for dirt. It just appeared. I miss you already. Can't wait to see you again. F. Simple. Blunt. Ugly. I sat there, staring at the screen, hearing the shower running upstairs. Hearing the water pound against the tiles like a drumline at my own funeral. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I just sat very still, like a man watching a house catch fire with his family still inside. When she came downstairs, towel around her shoulders, casual as Sunday morning coffee, I asked. Not angry. Not accusing. Just asked. Who is F? The smile dropped from her face like a mask hitting the floor. For a second, just one, she looked scared. Then she shrugged. Shrugged, like she'd just forgotten to pay a parking ticket. His name's Farid, she said. I met him through a friend. We're in love. No tears. No apologies. Just facts. Cold. Clean. Surgical. I asked her if she wanted to try counseling. She laughed. Actually laughed. Said counseling was for people who still had something to save. The next week, she filed for divorce. And because life is the kind of comedian who doesn't know when to stop, she sued me for half. Half of the house I bought. Half of the retirement fund I spent years building. Half of everything I thought we were building together. It didn't matter that she was the one who cheated. Didn't matter that I had proof. In the eyes of the court, marriage is an equation, two names on paper, split down the middle when the ink dries. I stood in that courtroom, wearing the same dress uniform I wore the day I married her, and listened while her lawyer described me like I was an obstacle she bravely overcame. When the gavel came down, I lost the house. Lost half the savings. Lost a woman I would have fought a war for without ever knowing she'd already surrendered to someone else. Walking out of that courtroom, papers in hand, I realized something simple and ugly. Trust isn't lost in a scream or a slap. It's lost in a shrug, in the way someone stops choosing you and doesn't even bother to hide it. I drove home, or rather, to my new rented apartment, with the peeling paint and the broken heater, and sat in the parking lot with the engine running. I wasn't crying. I wasn't raging. I was just empty. Laura had moved on. Farid, the man who slid into my life like a thief in the night, had won. Or so it seemed. Life, as it turned out, wasn't done writing my story. Not by a long shot. If you ever want to know what real loneliness feels like, try waking up at 2 in the morning with no one in the house but your own regrets. The first few months after the divorce, I didn't live so much as I drifted. Nights bled into mornings. Mornings bled into afternoons. And somewhere in between, I stopped checking which was which. At first, I thought I'd rebuild fast. New apartment, new furniture, new start. Turns out, you can change the walls, but the echoes come with you. The whiskey helped. At least until it didn't. At first it numbed the sharp edges, made the silence feel less heavy, made the bed feel less empty. But pretty soon, it didn't numb anything. It just made me slower to notice the bleeding. My so-called friends faded too. It's funny, you think you've got a battalion behind you, but when the smoke clears, most of them are just spectators, not soldiers. They didn't know what to say, so they said nothing. Or worse, they said the wrong things. You'll find someone better. At least you didn't have kids. Time heals. Time doesn't heal. It just teaches you how to hide the scars better. I learned to stop expecting calls. Stop checking if anyone would knock on my door. The door stayed closed. The phone stayed silent. And me? I stayed exactly where I was, a man orbiting the black hole where his marriage used to be. I didn't rage. I didn't break things. That would have been too easy, too human. Instead, I calcified. Became something quieter, heavier. A man made of stone on the outside, with just enough cracks underneath to leak poison if you looked close enough. The worst part wasn't losing her. It was realizing I never even tried to protect myself. I had walked into that marriage like a soldier marching into an ambush, smiling all the way. I thought loyalty would shield me. I thought love would earn me love in return. Turns out, some wars aren't fought with bullets. They're fought with boredom, betrayal, and indifference. And I lost. Completely. One night, I remember because it was raining so hard the water hammered against the window like fists. I sat at the kitchen table, bottle half empty, thinking about the past. And I asked myself a question. Not why did she leave? Not why am? Not even what did I do wrong? No. The real question was simpler. Who am I now? And I didn't have an answer. Not yet. But somewhere under the rubble, a thought started to form. A tiny, stubborn ember refusing to go out. I needed a mission again. A reason to get up. A purpose bigger than drinking myself to death in a rented apartment no one ever visited. I didn't know yet what that mission would be, but I knew this much. It wouldn't be found at the bottom of a bottle, and it sure as hell wouldn't be found in pity. Somewhere out there, the man who wrecked my life was living his smug, untouched, victorious. And I was still standing. Broken, yes, but standing. And maybe that counted for something. Maybe it could be the start of something bigger. I didn't enlist for patriotism. I didn't enlist for medals or speeches or parades. I enlisted because I needed something to aim at other than myself. The Army didn't ask many questions. Not when you had my file. Decorated graduate. Sharp mind. Clean shot. Just enough wreckage behind me to make me dangerous in the right way. When they asked if I had a preference, I didn't hesitate. Frontline. Afghanistan. Wherever it's worst. The recruiter raised an eyebrow, but he didn't argue. They needed bodies. And I wasn't bringing a heart for them to break. I requested sniper training. It wasn't about glory. It wasn't about feeling like some shadowy hero in a movie. It was about focus, breath control, patience, a clean equation, one breath, one shot, one less enemy. Simple math. No betrayal involved. Civilian life faded like old paint. The drinking stopped, not out of some grand epiphany, but because hangovers and precision don't mix. The loneliness stopped too, in a way. Not because I wasn't alone, but because out there, being alone meant being alive. Crowds could get you killed. Attachment could get you killed. Hope could get you killed. Detachment became my armor. Purpose became my rifle. The day I landed in Afghanistan, the heat punched me in the throat the second I stepped off the transport. It wasn't just hot. It was a kind of heat that felt personal, like the earth itself hated you. Dust filled your lungs, your mouth, your ears. The ground was cracked and angry, the color of old bones. Nothing soft. Nothing forgiving. Perfect. First mission came fast. They didn't baby the new guys out there. You either kept up or you went home in a box. We moved into a stretch of territory nicknamed the Devil's Backbone, a place so rough and riddled with insurgents it made the maps look like lies. Snipers set up first. That meant me. I found my spot, a shallow rise, dry brush giving me just enough cover to disappear into the landscape. I settled in, breathing slow, heartbeat slower, scope glinting in the dirty sun. I watched, waited, felt the world narrow to the tiny circle of glass in front of my eye. It was the cleanest I'd felt in years. No messy conversations. No broken promises. No text messages blinking betrayal. Just target. Windage. Breath. Squeeze. The first shot I took wasn't dramatic. No swelling music, no Hollywood slow motion. Just a silent correction in the chessboard of the desert. An enemy scout slumped over behind a crumbling wall, and the world kept turning like it hadn't even noticed. But I noticed. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel broken. I didn't feel lost. I felt necessary. Out here, no one pretended. No one smiled while loading the knife behind their back. If you wanted someone dead, you shot them. If you wanted someone to live, you covered their six. Simple. Honest, in the ugliest way. As I packed up my rifle and moved positions before the sun gave me away, I realized something strange. I belonged to the war now. Not to a flag. Not to a cause. Not even to the men beside me. To the war itself. The cold math of survival. The purity of purpose. For the first time since my life cracked open, I wasn't chasing something. I wasn't begging to be chosen. I was choosing. Every shot, every breath, every decision. The desert didn't owe me anything, and I owed it nothing. We understood each other that way. It was just another mission. That's how they all start. No grand speeches, no cinematic music. Just a set of coordinates, a set of orders, and the understanding that by the time anyone knew you were there, it was already too late. The briefing was short and grim. High-value target. Afghan fighter, experienced, slippery, responsible for roadside bombs, ambushes, and a handful of body bags that still haunted our platoon's nightly roll calls. A ghost of the mountains, they called him. The kind of enemy that makes your life shorter without ever seeing your face. I checked my gear. Checked it again. You don't get second chances where I was going. We moved out under a bruised sky, the sunset bleeding out slow over the ridgelines. I climbed to my spot, a vantage above a ruined village half swallowed by the desert. Broken stone walls. Shattered rooftops. And a silence thick enough to choke on. Settling into the dust, I nestled the rifle into my shoulder. Breathed in, breathed out. Became the ground. Became the nothing. Through my scope, the world narrowed down to a circle the size of a coin. Movement flickered, a flash of cloth, the glint of a weapon. And there he was. Tall. Confident. Moving like he owned the ruins he walked through. A rifle slung low across his back, casual. He wasn't hiding. He thought he was safe. A mistake. His last one. I adjusted for wind. Accounted for distance, about 800 yards. No rush. No hurry. The world around me might as well have stopped breathing. He turned slightly, talking to someone just out of my view. For a moment, he smiled. Funny thing about death, sometimes it catches you mid-laugh. I squeezed the trigger. Not a yank. Not a pull. Just the steady pressure of inevitability. The rifle barked once. Recoil pressed against my shoulder like a handshake. Through the scope, I watched the round hit just below his right eye. A red mist bloomed for an instant, then the body crumpled like a marionette with its strings cut. Silent. Final. The guy next to him ran. Didn't matter. My mission was done. I waited, as trained, scanning for secondary threats. Nothing. Just dust. Just the slow settling of death back into the rocks. The call came over the radio. Confirmation. Cheers. Claps on the back when I rejoined the unit. Nice shot, man. Took out a real bastard. You just made a lot of families back home sleep easier tonight. I nodded, smiled the way you're supposed to. Let them pour the congratulations over me like cheap liquor at a bad bar. Inside, nothing. No pride. No regret. No triumph. Just that same steady, cold river running under my ribs. The one that started the night Laura told me about Farid. Another ghost in a land already haunted. Another name I didn't know. Another body I wouldn't remember. At least, that's what I thought at the time. Because in war, just like in life, the worst shots are the ones you don't realize you've fired until years later. War didn't end with fireworks for me. It ended the way a dying campfire does, slow, sputtering, leaving more ash than light. Orders came down. Deployment over. Pack up your scars and souvenirs, and fly home like it never happened. I didn't celebrate. Didn't buy a welcome home banner. Didn't call anyone. There was no one left to call. I stepped off the transport plane onto American soil the same way a man steps off a sinking ship, relieved, but half expecting the ground to give way under him too. Turns out, civilian life wasn't any safer than a war zone. Just quieter about the ways it tried to kill you. Everyone moved too fast, talked too loud, laughed too easily. At the grocery store, a woman got mad at the cashier for forgetting to double bag her yogurt, and I had to walk out before the rage swallowed me whole. People cried over coffee orders being wrong, posted pictures of their brunches like they were solving world hunger. And me? I couldn't even finish a sandwich without checking the exits first. The jobs came and went. Security guard, warehouse grunt, mechanics assistant. Nothing stuck because I didn't want anything to stick. I didn't want to be anything anymore. I paid cash for a tiny apartment above a laundromat. No pictures on the walls. No furniture that couldn't be carried in 2 arms. Just a bed, a table, a chair. Enough. Time dripped by slow, like a leaky faucet. Nights stretched out into endless dark oceans, and I floated on them without paddles, without maps. Most people thought I was cold, standoffish, broken. They were wrong. I wasn't broken. I was finished. There's a difference. Then one night, a stupid night, a random Thursday, everything shifted. I was sitting at a rundown bar, nursing a beer I didn't even want, when I heard it. 2 guys at the next table, laughing too loud, bragging about deployments and the kind of half-truths drunk men trade like baseball cards. One of them dropped a name. Remember that fighter they ID'd last month? Farid Nazim? Took him long enough to figure it out. Bastard was real close with some of the radicals out east. I don't remember standing up. I don't remember paying my tab. I just remember walking out into the freezing night air, my boots hitting the sidewalk like gunshots. Farid. Farid. Not a common name. Not a coincidence. I leaned against a rusted lamppost and stared up at the stars, cold and distant and perfect, and let the realization settle over me like fresh snow. The man I killed out there in the dust and the silence. The man I put down without a flicker of hesitation was the same man who wrecked my marriage. The same man Laura threw everything away for. I had killed him, not on purpose, not out of revenge, just by the cold arithmetic of war. No poetry, no warning, just one breath, one shot, one ghost gone. I stood there a long time that night, long enough for the cold to sink into my bones, long enough for the awe to fade into something heavier. I didn't feel joy, didn't feel triumph, not even sorrow, just this strange, grim satisfaction. Like a scale in the universe had quietly tilted back a few degrees toward balance. Funny thing about fate. Sometimes, it doesn't need you to seek justice. Sometimes, it just uses you as the weapon. And you don't even realize you were pulling the trigger on more than one life until it's already done. I didn't rush it. Some things are too important to rush. It took me 3 nights. 3 nights sitting at that rickety kitchen table, the lamp buzzing overhead, a blank piece of paper staring back at me like a loaded gun. How do you tell someone you killed the man they wrecked their life and yours for? How do you tell them without sounding bitter? Without sounding victorious? Without sounding anything at all? Simple. You strip it down to the bones. You remove every trace of yourself from the words. I wrote it out longhand first. Old habit. Makes you slow down. Makes you think. The first drafts were messy. Too emotional. Too human. I tossed them into the trash without ceremony. This wasn't about getting closure. Closure is a fairy tale people tell themselves after the last page rips out of the book. This was about truth. Naked, sharp, undeniable. The final version was short. Surgical. Like the shot itself. Laura. Farid Nazim was killed in action during the conflict in Afghanistan. He was shot by a U.S. sniper. That sniper was your ex-husband. No need to reply. No one else needs to know. No greeting. No signature. No hint of anger or satisfaction. Just a scalpel dragged across old flesh. I didn't handwrite it. Too risky. Typed it. Printed it at a public library 2 towns over, wearing a ball cap and sunglasses like I was planning a heist. Slipped it into a plain white envelope. No return address. No fingerprints. Dropped it in a random mailbox 2 states away during a long, pointless drive where the highway stretched out like a noose. As simple as that. Gone. Out of my hands. Floating toward her like a storm cloud she'd never see coming. Afterward, I went home. Sat at the window with the lights off, watching the night crawl by. I told myself I didn't care if she reacted. Told myself I didn't care if she screamed, or cried, or drank herself into oblivion. Told myself I didn't care if she tore the letter up and pretended it never existed. And maybe I didn't. Not really. It wasn't about what she did with the truth. It was about making sure the truth was out there, hanging over her life the way her betrayal had hung over mine. Some truths don't set you free. They just show you how high the walls around your life really are. And then they leave you there, staring up at them, alone. The first call came 3 days after I mailed the letter. Blocked number. Straight to voicemail. Her voice was sharp, clipped, almost businesslike. I don't know what kind of sick joke this is, but you better pray it isn't you. Click. I smiled, not out of joy. Out of recognition. That was the Laura I knew. Fight first. Question later. The text started that night. 12 in an hour. Then 100. Some furious. Some frantic. Some pathetic. Was it you? Tell me it's not true. Please answer me. You're sick. You're lying. You're all I have left who knew him. I muted the notifications after the first 50. Not because they bothered me. Because they didn't. Emails followed. Long ones. Rambling ones. Half accusations, half confessions, the kind of word vomit people spew when the walls start closing in and they realize no one's coming to pull them out. She needed answers. She needed closure. She needed a hand to hold while she drowned. And for the first time in my life, I didn't offer it. I didn't reply. Not once. Not with a word. Not with a hint. Silence, I realized, is the loudest revenge. You don't have to shout to leave someone shaking. You just have to leave them alone with the truth they can't swallow. The rumors started not long after. Small town. Big mouths. Easy math. People said she wasn't herself anymore. That she cried in public. That she'd been let go from her fancy consulting job, too many personal emergencies, too many days when she just didn't show up. Someone said they saw her sitting in her car outside a church she hadn't set foot in since our wedding, just staring at the stained glass windows like she was waiting for them to break. Another said she'd been drinking too much, making scenes, asking strangers if they believed in fate. Life, it seemed, was cashing the check she wrote years ago. And me? I watched from a distance, like a man standing on the shore, watching a ship sink that he once almost boarded. I didn't feel joy. Not the way I thought I might. There was satisfaction, sure, the grim kind you get from fixing a crooked picture frame no one else noticed was crooked. There was pity, too thin and cold, like the last light of a dying fire. I didn't hate her anymore. I didn't love her either. She was just a cautionary tale wearing a familiar face. But mostly I felt something close to closure. Not the Hollywood kind with soft music and big speeches. No tearful reconciliations. No apologies. No forgiveness. Just a quiet understanding. She had destroyed something precious. And the world had destroyed something precious to her. And neither one of us could take it back. You don't win some wars. You just survive them long enough to walk away. And I had walked away. Finally. Completely. After the dust settled, after the calls stopped, after the text dried up like a riverbed in summer, the final piece of the story found me. Not because I went looking. Because truth has a nasty habit of showing up whether you want it to or not. It started with a news article. Some grainy, half-forgotten corner of the internet where old conflicts go to rot. Headline was nothing special. Another report about insurgent networks, arrests, cleanup operations. But the name? Farid Nazim. Same man. Same smile. Different context. Turns out Farid wasn't just some charming rogue Laura stumbled across at a conference or a gallery opening, wrapped in mystery and adventure like a souvenir scarf. He wasn't just a passionate foreigner who made her feel young and reckless again. He was connected. Deeply. ugly roots reaching into radical cells that had left their fingerprints on everything from bomb craters to mass graves. He'd moved money, moved weapons, moved people. He wasn't just a man playing at revolution. He was part of it. The same man who slipped into my marriage like a thief in the night had been slipping explosives into marketplaces, ambushes into convoy routes, death into homes. And Laura? She never knew, never cared to know. She only saw what she wanted to see. The dark hair, the accent, the dangerous smile, the promise of excitement. The exotic escape hatched from the life she decided was too small. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It wasn't just love she spat on. It was loyalty. It was trust. It was country. And she never even realized the bullet she dodged. Never realized the man she thought would save her was the kind of man who would have burned the whole world down if it meant getting what he wanted. She wasn't a victim. She wasn't innocent. She was complicit in her own undoing. Used, yes, but only because she chose to be blind to everything that didn't flatter her fantasy. And me? I sat at that same kitchen table, the news article open on the cracked screen of an old laptop, and I laughed. Not loud, not bitter, just a low, tired chuckle. The kind of laugh you give when the last mask finally falls off and you see the ugly truth for what it's always been. I had spent years mourning a life that never really existed. A woman who never really loved me. A loyalty that only ever pointed one way. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It wasn't about winning. It wasn't even about her. It was about finally understanding that the real betrayal wasn't that she left. It was that she was never really there to begin with. You can patch a cracked wall. You can mend a broken fence. But you can't fix a house built on lies. You can only walk away from the ruins. And I had. Long ago. Long before I realized how deep the rot went. Dear viewer, thank you for your invaluable viewing. We will be very grateful for your likes, subscriptions, comments, and sharing our story. See you soon.